I was born and raised LDS. There was sexual abuse in my childhood. So I'm in Young Women's now, and that was straight out of a Mean Girls movie. How does the Lord delight in the chastity of women if men can take it from them? Yeah. I just started asking to be the ward paradigm shifter, and then I never got any callings extended to me after that. I had this vision open up to me, and I was on my knees with a brush scrubbing my brain. And Jesus entered, and he took that from me, and he's like, you be still, essentially. Like, you are good. I'll take over.
Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 40 of the Clarity Podcast. I'm your host Claire, and this week's guest was Julie Sagnimeni. Today with Julie, we discussed everything from sexual abuse happening within the church and dating in LDS culture to witchcraft and cults and narcissism. We covered so many heavy topics today, but these are the things that need to be talked about because people are hurting, and we are going to heal by talking about the difficult things. I am just so grateful to Julie and her courage and her vulnerability in this episode. You guys are not going to want to miss this episode. All this and more on this week's episode of the Clarity Podcast. Everyone has a journey they're walking. And along that road, we are met with potholes, road bumps, rain, storms, and sometimes just fog. But through it all, we're really just looking for one thing: clarity. Clarity so we can walk with confidence in that next step. There's one source I run to for that clarity. In the darkest of nights, Jesus offers me light that shines through even the thickest storms. Welcome to the Clarity Podcast, where we find clarity through the one who saves us all. Everybody, and welcome to episode 40 of the Clarity Podcast. I'm your host, Claire, and this week's guest is Julie Sagnimeni. Welcome to the podcast, Julie.
Thank you, Claire. It's amazing to be here.
Thank you so much for being here. Julie came all the way from Arizona, right?
I did.
That's awesome. We are so thrilled to have an in-person interview, people coming from out of state. I think my favorite part of the podcast is meeting new faces and new people that are from far away that want to share their stories. So grateful that you were willing to come out here today. All right, go ahead and introduce yourself, Julie. Tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and how old you are.
All right. I am 40 years old, and or 40 years young, as I like to say. But I grew up in Idaho and moved to Arizona after I graduated, just right when I turned 18. Lived in Arizona ever since. I'm it's like Gilbert, northeast, southeast Valley, I guess is where I'm at now. So I've been married for 18 years. I have 4 children, ages 10 through 17 right now. I stay at home and I homeschool. And I homeschooled before it was cool. The zombie apocalypse, essentially. 2020.
That's awesome.
And I like to write and sing and just been on this journey, so the journey has kind of become what I do.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of people relate to that. Awesome. All right, let's transition into your childhood.
Okay.
Go ahead and give us some context for your life. What religion were you raised in, and what were you like growing up as a kid?
Okay. Well, I was born and raised LDS, and I feel like I had a pretty basic childhood. I was a happy kid. As a happy kid, I loved Jesus. I had the older brother that picked on me or whatever because I'd sing, I'm trying to be like Jesus, like all the time, and I feel my Savior's love, and I was just always singing, and he's like, that was like a major conflict. Loved primary. Mostly the singing time, but I was also the one that would like stand in front of the class, like the reverend's example, always chosen for that. Mm-hmm. Like my parents, my mom never missed church. And my mom dealt with chronic illness, and she never missed church. And
wow, she's tough.
It seemed like things that were church activities, she always managed to make it to, and other things maybe just weren't as, I don't know exactly how to frame it, what her experience was, just what I observed. So, my, dad was, he was always a good example. Like his thing was always about family is important, and all the church ordinances things and all the setting apart and any baptism, anything that we can go and support family, that was super important to him. We'd wake up really early to have family scripture study, and not like consistently my whole life, but there were solid efforts my parents put in. So, and I just always tried to be the example a lot. I just had this innate sense for I loved God. I loved Jesus, and I just wanted to please him. But in the same time, I didn't feel like I wasn't. I just felt his love so much, and I lived in that space of knowing God loved me. And
that's beautiful. So do you feel like it was the church that was teaching you the love of God, or your parents that was teaching you the love of God? Where did you kind of get that really rooted core that you had as a child?
Unfortunately, it was more, I'm a puddle. This is just what I do.
That is okay.
There was I don't have struggles talking about it. Like, it's not a private thing. It's a how do you say it? But there was sexual abuse in my childhood. Someone who I was put in their care took advantage of how much access they had to me, and with the combo of my mom not being well and the secrecy, that nature of everything, I didn't have anyone else to turn to. And so, I mean, I as a mother, I know I could have gone to my mother now, but as a child, you know, like, I just, like, I know I said I had a basic childhood, and it felt like that to me because I just had Jesus through it all. So,
well, that's beautiful that you were able to lean into Jesus at such a young age. Things like that are happening more and more and more in our world. And it's really sad how evil our world is getting that's happening. And I'm so sorry that happened to you, but it's a refining process. And obviously you were able to lean into Jesus, which is beautiful. So tell us maybe how that affected your childhood a little bit. And how are you navigating your mom being chronically ill? What was your relationship like with your mom while you were navigating these things, but then also just trying to be a kid and grow up and have kind of a normal life?
Okay. Well, the first thing that came to my mind was when I was 5, she had mono. And I remember I would always just seek her out, you know, and I'd go in her room, and I learned how to share the space in her bed without like disturbing her too much. Like, I got really good at just like being able to be with her, and she was my mono mamo. And
that's cute.
Yeah. And it's just what it was, you know? And I was very academic. I loved school, and then coming home I'd read. I did a lot of reading. It was a lot of probably kind of checking out, honestly, but yeah, you don't know that as a kid. What was the other part you asked me?
Just navigating your mom's illness and the relationship you had, but then also navigating what you went through.
Okay.
And what, like, did the church play a part in helping you through that? Did you never tell anybody?
I never told anyone. My sister was also a victim to this. And when she went to girls' camp, when she was 14, she confided in a leader. And that kind of started the ball rolling towards steps. It stopped. Everything stopped at that point in my life. So I was around 10 or 11 when things stopped. And I remember I was asked one time if anything had happened to me. And the thing is that I felt like I was complicit. that I was doing wrong things. And so I was not ready to have that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And the sad part was that and within a few days of being asked, I figured out I wanted to like say something, but I didn't know how to bring it up. And it was never brought up ever again. It was never brought up ever again. And I didn't know how to bring it up. And so I kind of lived with that into my young adult. Like no one knew. I don't think I shared anything until I'd moved out of my house at 18. So,
wow, you carried that for a long time by yourself. Long time. So do you feel like that helped you maybe as a mother to kind of open the doors of communication more with your children? Maybe like tell us a little bit what that taught you.
Okay. So as a mom, I have certain, like we have like no sleepover rules. We have, and I just have a lot of open communication with them of like, there's tricky adults, not stranger danger. There's tricky adults or caretakers. And, if like, and I will ask you, like, if we go somewhere or if someone's with us or a circumstances change or there's new people in our life, like I'm going to ask you and ask you and ask you. And it's not because I don't trust that you're telling me the truth, and I'll tell you,
But
it's
you're
because
creating a
I'm
safe space for your kids to talk to you.
Yeah. And give them the opportunity. I'm like, if you don't feel safe this time that I ask you, maybe you'll feel safe the next time. Mm-hmm. And maybe you'll never have anything to ever have to confide about, but I will actively try to establish those opportunities and I tell them like, I will do this for you. And, trying to think if there's just some firm boundaries that we've had in place, that we don't choose who we're going to trust and trust one person, but not trust another. It's just going to be a basic, we don't do these certain things. We don't do alone trips. We don't do,
Yeah, definitely.
So it's, which can be hard if you're extended family and you're like, why can't you just send your kids over to have some cousin time or whatever. And it's just like, cause I need to be there. Yeah. I've established I will be there. So,
well, and when you're a kid, you don't fully understand why your parents lay down these boundaries for you. But after I grew up and I started, getting to know lots of people who had undergone sexual abuse like yourself, I suddenly had this realization, this is why my parents told me no to go to so many things because they were protecting me. And so there's also, I believe, this culture in the church where we don't talk about hard things. Do you feel like that culture affected you at all throughout your life?
I feel like I could wear a badge of honor if I talk about hard things. And my best friend has always told me that that's something she's admired about me, that even if the hard things are areas I'm struggling with, not just what things that have happened to me, but just being real with not trying to put on that perfect LDS face, I guess, is kind of how it pans out, really.
Yeah.
So
yeah, definitely. I think trying to put on that perfect LDS face is what keeps us in silence and it keeps people hurting. Whereas we initiate healing when we start to talk about it and we start to tell people that are safe people. And I wish that we could propel that into the LDS culture a little bit. Right.
Because then it also helps people not feel so alone in their own thing, feeling like they're isolated. It's one of the, I think, a pretty powerful tool of the devil to isolate people.
Yes. It blows my mind how many people I talk to still feel like they're alone when it comes to things like sexual abuse or pornography addiction or these really heavy topics. And they're like, oh, I'm the only one. No, we are in this together. There are so many people who have undergone these things. When we can connect together, we can help each other heal. And so this is a really important conversation that we're having here. And I appreciate you being open and honest about it.
For sure. I do remember, as far as dealing with the church with it, going to the bishop I remember trying to talk to the bishop once, and I think I was 13, and I was I didn't have words for anything to,
Right.
and I was, maybe I didn't have my badge of honor of talking about hard things yet, because
Well, you were young too.
I was still working on that
So
merit
young.
badge. So, but I remember that the person wasn't actually, there were no solutions given. There was no counseling. There's nothing set up. But the person was still pretty prominent in our lives. There wasn't any space or separation that was established. And so my sister never ever really got to a space where she felt safe. And I think I was maybe spared that by the fact that I was younger, and I don't know if it's better that I just kind of had it just inside the whole time and I didn't have to feel let down by any system or whatever. But trying to talk to my bishop when I was 13, in subsequent interviews, he would ask me, like, he just demonstrated he didn't understand at all what was going on. He thought that I had, because I'm at 13, I now had a 1-year-old little brother, thought that I was a perpetrator to my little brother who was a baby. Like, and I remember being just so confused in this conversation, because I'd just been asking for help understanding what's kind of been awoken in my young body in this nature that I didn't know how to even handle, so.
And there wasn't any help.
There was no help.
People ask me why I'm mad about the church. Okay. Because if we're the true church of God, why are we not doing better, people? Like, that's why.
And it just strikes me now that I'm like, why is that the thought, the forefront at this person's mind, that I was the problem, not needing the one needing the help.
A 13-year-old girl. You're a little girl.
And there was a baby. Like, anyway, it's troubling that's the direction that took. And I don't want to insinuate anything. It's just troubling.
Yeah, it is very troubling. Definitely. Okay, let's transition into your teenage years a little bit. We're kind of already there. You're 13 years old. So let's talk about kind of what your life was like in the church when you were a teenager. Pivotal time in a young woman's life. You're learning a lot about yourself. What was the church like, and what was your relationship with Jesus like?
Okay, so I'm in Young Women's now, and that was straight out of a Mean Girls movie. Like,
really? Tell me all about it.
There was the queen bee, and if anyone, she didn't like me, so no one else could like me. Which I had my friend, as a beehive, the girls who were my age and went to school with me, they were my friends, but it was really hard showing up and being bullied by the Maya maids. And then I'd look up to, there was some laurels I really looked up to, but there was just such a buffer in age and such a division of just the ageism, the ageist, it's, I don't know, just the thing that public school tends to create, that separation in peer association, and you're only learning from people your own age.
We're not being taught to learn from older kids and protect younger kids. Instead, we're learning that you only hang out with your age. And I do not understand that, because that is not real life ever, ever in real life.
And I always felt like I got along better with people outside of my age group. And I'd go over to my friend's house and hang out with their mom,
Yep.
And so within the church, it was hard to go. And my mom would say, church is not a social event. And I would be like, what about fellowshipping then? Like, what is that about? Why are we all supposed to have a responsibility and a friend? There's 3 things, but those are the 2 I remember. Okay, so this just came to mind. It was also when Hinckley's Beatitudes came out, the be grateful, be humble, be prayerful, clean, whatever, all of those, right?
Right.
And just recently I was kind of looking back through some journals, and it struck me that what the Beatitudes are, the Sermon on the Mount, that is the doctrine of Christ. That is the kingdom of heaven. That is coming unto him and being saved. And we got be humble, be grateful, we got it just relegated down to a a sign you put up in your kitchen with vinyl lettering,
Yeah.
and you lose the whole heart of what that actually has in as power in your life to come into Christ. So, and I remember I ate it all up. I all of the little sayings, one-liners that came through conference. I loved it. I loved the gospel. I loved to study on my own. I would do my personal progress. I did not like church. It was so boring. It was so boring and so painful, and the girls didn't like me. And
oh my goodness, I relate to so much of you. Holy cow, that's how I felt.
I feel like it originated with the culture of the church, but it got permeated through my home, where like personal revelation was something that adults could have, and it was to be used to, like, I don't want to say manipulate, but like influence you in it. I don't want to say manipulate, but it was spiritual manipulation.
Right.
And the thing that's really terrible about that is that because it wasn't revelation, it wasn't personal revelation. It was a, I'm not going to say it never was with any of the adults, but it was more their own agenda and ego. And then it was put through the lens of, but God wants this. And so when I'd have personal revelation, it was received through that same, well, but I don't even receive it. I'm just pretending anyway. In a sense, that's how I feel like I've experienced how it was received from me. And so my personal revelation was always dismissed. And there are a lot of things that as I've been waking up and studying the scriptures, God has been like, do you remember when I showed you this when you were a little girl? And you remember just the faith, I remember as a child wanting to I wanted to pray and see Lehi's vision too. And I talked to adults about it, and probably a primary teacher. And I really wish I'd understood that primary teachers were just, they probably didn't even want to be there.
Yeah.
They just didn't know how to say no to a calling. And they didn't have that authority that I thought that they must have had, because God called them to that. But they'd tell me that, well, Lehi and Nephi, like people in the Book of Mormon, were special. It's wrong for you to pray about those things.
What? That is so sad. Church culture is not teaching the right things.
Yeah. But it's been really great. I feel it's been a gift. It's just keep opening up little gifts now that I'm waking up and be like, remember when I showed you this? And then no condemnation, that I trusted the adults in my life, which of course I trusted in the arm of flesh, but I was also in their care and under their stewardship.
Yeah. When you're a kid, you do have to trust the adults in your life. Unfortunately, in the church, we're putting unwell adults in positions where they're with kids, and that is not a healthy thing, and it should not be happening. I don't care what anybody says. Like, it should not be happening, and we should be aware of what's going on so that isn't happening, because kids do need to feel safe. Kids do rely on the adults in their lives. And what happens when you're going to a church and you suddenly can't trust the adults that are supposed to be caring for your kids? Like, what are you supposed to do then? Keep going to church and putting them in a harmful situation?
Honestly, home church has been the most amazing solution to all of that.
Right. Okay.
So more on just those teenage years, I would have to say, especially within the church, that's when all the chastity and virtue lessons came up.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about this.
So
what was that like for you?
It was pretty awful.
Oh,
because remember, I felt complicit in my abuse. And so when I remember this one lesson, it was an object lesson, and the teacher brought these beautifully decorated cupcakes and had them out all on display, and she encouraged us to go get one. And when we went and got them, we could see that some of them had been licked. And we're like, ew, like they've been licked. Like what's going on? She's like, well, you still go ahead and choose one. And so we then were like inspecting every single one to make sure we didn't get a licked one. And the lesson was no one wants the licked cupcake.
Oh my goodness. That's like worse than the chewed piece of gum. Like,
I mean, they made us choose. They made us be the person that wouldn't choose that. And I was just like, I'm all those unwanted. Like, I didn't even want it. I didn't want the like cupcake. And that was like me, you know?
oh my goodness. What does that do to a young girl? Like, what did that do to your view of yourself and your body and who you are?
I felt pretty worthless. I punished myself a lot. I actually turned to food as a kid. That was the other thing is that was a numbing thing, stuffing all those feelings down.
Right.
And so I also had weight issues. Mm-hmm. And so about that time, I instead got an eating disorder. Mm. And so then I was punishing myself for not being like strong enough to like for being weak. If I was hungry and had like a grape, or a spoonful of yogurt, how out of control I was. And I was out of control, just not in the way that I, had the perception of. But I was very unkind to myself, but I hadn't been shown any better way to be to myself either.
Right. We're not teaching the sexual morality correctly in the church. And I've said this before on this podcast, we're not promoting fornication or sexual promiscuity, but we are promoting that we teach this correctly and we teach repentance. Purity is a state of your heart. And so you can become pure if you have made mistakes in your life through Jesus Christ. Nobody told me that when I was a kid. Did anybody tell you that?
No, it's gone. It's gone and you can never get it back.
Yeah, and that's false.
How does the Lord delight in the chastity of women if men can take it from them?
Yeah.
I have come to understand in another light that part of being chaste is being true. And I think that women have this innate sense of like this being drawn to Christ, having more of that wanting to be true to him. Mm-hmm. And I think that in a sense, that's part of the chastity that the Lord delights in, is that we turn to him first. We put him first, and not across the board, but those women who are godly women, I would say there's a second layer to understanding the chastity the Lord delights in women.
Definitely.
And then, I could be wrong, but it's brought some comfort there. Especially when I thought it was something you couldn't get back if it was taken from you. Yeah. That was something that could never be taken from me, though part of my story is people did try.
Yeah. Well, and we're not teaching that virtue it's absolutely sexual purity, but then it's also just cleansing our inner vessel and purifying ourselves and trying to be better every single day. But it's almost like we teach this, you're stuck. You have to remain stuck. If something has happened to you or you've made a mistake, you're stuck and you can't get out of it. And that's not what Jesus teaches in his word. We can be completely cleansed and purified through him.
Saul, I mean, how did someone who was murdering
right
be called as an apostle,
right,
and changed? There's so many stories. It's never, it's not what it looks like in the church hierarchy of who is called of God, of who's most successful and who's the most obedient and who's like it's the prodigal son. It's the father that's there for his child.
Yes.
Regardless of the choices they made, they still have that worth and value.
Yes. And we're walking like this tightrope of like middle ground, because you have the exmos that promote sexual sin like openly, which drives me crazy, by the way. And then you have, the LDS, which is the licked cupcake theory. That is so messed up. Okay, and we're here saying, yes, we need to be virtuous and pure and clean, but through Christ we can be made clean and virtuous and pure. And so it's so different. It's such a different narrative than anybody is used to in this world. But this is what the scriptures teach. Go read the scriptures. That's how we can heal from these things that are really hurting people, I think.
Yes, the scriptures bring so much healing and understanding and light and just comfort. Just so much peace. So
Absolutely. So did you find healing from your eating disorder and what was going on, learning about chastity? Did you find healing in your teenage years, or was it till much later that you started to experience healing?
it was later. I know that around 16, I got my patriarchal blessing, almost as a side note, like almost as it was going to end, and then he changed his mind, was you've been blessed with a beautiful body, which the Lord desires for you to learn to care for and treat as a temple of God. That was the first step to me healing from that particular eating disorder, and finding that God's love is so healing. It's like, that was specifically just for me. This isn't like a patriarchal blessing that's like, that line is for 40 years in the future to guide my life. That was like exactly right now what God wanted me to know. And I felt seen and I felt loved, and that's exactly how God moves in your life to bring healing, is that love. And it's really hard not to change when you experience God's love.
Yes. God's love is the most powerful force in this world. Like, that's how we actually obtain power to overcome, to repent, to heal from things that are not our fault. God's love is the most powerful force in the world, for sure.
There's so many. Yeah, it's just every pivotal moment in my life, I feel, is based on an experience where I just deeply felt his love and was able to shift and change and lean into that. I did want to share another chastity lesson, if that's all right.
Yep. Is it going to make me cringe?
Oh, yes.
Oh, man.
Yes.
Okay.
So it was in seminary, and the seminary teacher brought a flower, and it was just, he's like, hands the flower to the first kid in the class, and he's like, pass around the flower and sniff it, like smell it, like twirl it in your hand, do whatever you want with the flower, and just keep passing it on, like experience the flower, pass it on. And so, most people would smell the flower and pass it, and then, but I was watching, and unfortunately, like some of the guys who'd get it would like rip off petals, or because we were said we could do whatever we wanted to the flower, and we were told, and some people really took that to heart, and so it just passed around the classroom, and it got to the front, and it's just this broken, wilted, sad little thing. And that's when he said that was a promiscuous girl. That was an illustration of a promiscuous girl.
A promiscuous girl? So he didn't...
And the boys were given license to do whatever they wanted to that flower. I mean, we all were, but the boys were the ones that that wrecked it, that ruined it. And so I was like looking at that flower, like, I'm that ruined flower. Like,
plus, like, what about promiscuous boys? They're not ruined? What? Oh my goodness, we are damaging the women in this church. This like grinds me so hard. I think your virtue lessons were worse than mine, for sure. Like, I remember like reading the chewed piece of gum analogy, but these are worse.
Yeah, they were. I'm trying to remember the chewed piece of gum one. That's where my mind went, but it definitely didn't help me. I mean, in the sense that now I'm in my dating years, I'm 16. We should not be dating when we're 16. Like
This is probably true.
Dating is to find who you're going to marry. And while like maybe co-ed activities and learning more about what you want, but I thought I was going to marry my boyfriend when I was 16. Like
too.
I
Hey.
loved him so much.
Me too.
And we're getting married in 4 years, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
After he's gone on a mission and he's come home and we can get married in the temple, right?
yeah. And
did he break your heart?
yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because that's when, with all these lessons, I was like, okay, like I wasn't promiscuous, but I had a freeze response if boys tried things. And so I went to the bishop over a lot of things that happened, but I wasn't like participating. And I actually had a really great bishop who, like, I came in and sat with him and he's like, "You're not here to talk to me." And he pointed me to a picture of Christ on the wall. He's like, "You can tell him whatever you want. He's where you'll find healing. He's who you're here to see. And if you need, like, you know, if you want some feedback from me, I'm here. I support you. I get the struggle of youth, you know, all these things, but like, you're with him, you're good with him." And he was just supportive and a little bit hands off on this sense of like that authority figure. And so I had that was really good for me. Like, but that boyfriend broke up with me to date girls who would cross all the lines. And so if they were all moths, I was a flame. It was just really hard dating in the church. I really think there's something to that purity culture. I've never wanted to use like the purity culture things, but there's something to that expectation for perfection, for like to not make mistakes and to keep everything secret and not to be able to, not even being able to partake of the sacrament,
right?
Which honestly we know that's being done wrong anyway.
Yeah.
Like,
I feel like the sacrament is for the purpose of cleansing and purifying us. And so to take that away, so it's like, it's a secret, but it's not, because people see that you're not taking the sacrament. So it's like this weird twisty road that we try to take. And it's just strange. Like, it's so strange.
It is. It is. Should I segue into young adulthood?
Yes.
Just on the boy line?
Yes, definitely. So tell us about, 18, 19, 20. What are you doing in your life in the church with dating? Now you're either deciding, am I going on a mission? Am I going to college? What were you doing at this time in your life?
So the only time I ever wanted to go on a mission was when I was like 7, and I said I wanted to go to Australia, and then I found out you didn't get to choose, and then I wasn't interested anymore. So, I already said I was really academic. I was known as like, that was where my identity was in my academic life. So I had a full ride scholarship to the University of Idaho up in Moscow. But the last semester of my senior year, a DeVry University recruiter came to my high school, and he was in this, he just came to present, and I was like, I already have my plan figured out. So I'm just doing my homework and ignoring him. At the end of the presentation, he's like, "Okay, anyone who's interested in enrollment, just raise your hand and I'll like give you things." And my arm just went up of its own volition. Like, I'm like, I guess I'm interested. This is a surprise to me. I should have been listening. Where am I going now? And so, that was the beginning of God's hand, fully orchestrating my move to Arizona. I didn't have any other way to get up to Arizona. I didn't have a job. I didn't have a car. I didn't have any family in the area. And I drove down to Arizona with my DeVry recruiter, and my parents followed about 4 days later. We got to Arizona. I stayed with the family he knew. I went to their singles ward. Then I'm in a singles ward with my roommate, which I just felt God's hand in that whole thing. Like, what are the odds? In the singles ward, it was still like the guys just are so disappointing.
Yes, they are. This is so true. Like, I wish it wasn't that way.
Like, there was this guy who wanted to date me, and I was trying to not be like, I felt like I'd spent so much of my teenage years being boy crazy and just running into trouble and not wanting it. And so he's pursuing me, and I'm kind of putting him off, and he shows up at my apartment and one evening, and I'm already in my pajamas, and I was in something that was sleeveless. And we like just went out to the like courtyard and we're talking. And it was so weird because he was like, he like rubbed my shoulder, and he's like, I have such a weakness for flesh. Like,
what? Oh my gosh. What?
And I'm just like, what is it about me that makes you think I want to know this, or that this would like, well, hey then, like what?
This is why we have a fear of showing our shoulders. Like, okay.
I am in defiance right now.
I'm cool with that. I still have like this complex. I work on a farm and I wear tank tops now, and I'm still like, something is wrong because of the not showing your shoulders thing.
Yeah.
But you get guys saying stuff like that to you, obviously we're going to be paranoid. Like, come on.
It was rough.
What did you say to him? Did you just stand there like, what?
I don't remember. I remember feeling so awkward. I remembered the pit in my stomach of like, I don't want to date another sleaze bucket,
Right.
That can't, like, you're trying to convince me to date you by touching me when I don't want to be touched, and telling me your weakness is going to be, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I kept putting him off.
That was probably wise of you.
Yeah. I don't know how that would have panned out. I don't think it could have been worse than the guy I did end up dating. Honestly, unfortunately.
So what happened with that?
The guy I was interested in was out of town the week that this guy was so aggressively pursuing me. Mm-hmm. And I kept on being like, well, I don't feel like I'm supposed to be dating. I had a hard time being direct and just saying no. And so I had reasons. And so when this other guy came back and then he showed interest in me and then we start dating, guy number one is like, I call them thing one and thing two. Thing one was angry. Like, he was so angry that I didn't like him back. And it was just like, I don't know what you think this is going to like help your case. So I start dating this other guy. And thing two, he, things weren't going to get too serious. He had just put in papers to go on a mission, and he was older. So it was like this guy, his past was he was essentially an escort in a previous life before I met him. And he was like repenting from being like a bouncer at clubs and a male escort, I guess. But I didn't know these things about him initially. Mm-hmm. But like when we had like the deeper conversations in just where are you in your life and what are your past experiences, and he was like, well, I've cleaned up my life, I'm going to go on a mission, all these things, and I was fully supportive of that. And so I didn't intend on ever getting too serious with him. And honestly, I should have just been like, well, then let's not date. But I didn't know that. And I did what I did. So he ended up, he raped me. And I thought I had to marry him because if you have sex, you're supposed to marry the person. And he was my boyfriend. So I didn't, and because of all of the previous experiences with men or boys, and freeze response, and still going and I was complicit in my own abuse and just all of the things, like I thought I had to marry him. And so I spent like nine months to a year in that relationship with him, never anything ever consensual, just in an abusive relationship, thinking this was going to be my life. And not even knowing how I was going to make it to the temple because you're supposed to have like a year of repentance. And I'm like, there's just not even a chance with this person. But this is my future now.
So how did you get out of that?
God loved me. He loved me out of it. And it's interesting because it came in the form of me losing everything. But so I was in Arizona for DeVry, but this guy gave me a concussion, and so I missed my midterms, and then none of my professors would let me make up the midterm. They were just going to have me fail all of my classes, and I'd never gotten anything lower than an A- my whole life. And so I could not fathom failing. So I withdrew from DeVry. And there were a series of things that had happened with like establishing my life. So I had a car now, and but I had started working at DeVry, couldn't work there anymore on the program for students to work there because I wasn't a student. So I didn't have a job, and I had started working at my apartment complex, and I lived there too. And I lost that job, and I lost my break and rent because I worked there. And so I lost that break. So I couldn't afford my apartment anymore, and I didn't have a job, and I'm in this horrible relationship, but he has a roommate. Like, so everything, like I can't even move in with this guy. I didn't want to because I was still trying to do everything upright and on the surface and hiding all of these darker things that are going on in my life. Cause I just wanted to follow God. Mm-hmm. And so, I just remember that, out of nowhere, a new opportunity for a new job just fell in my lap. And, it came with moving in with a bunch of roommates. So my rent just quartered. And so all these problems that were over there just were taken care of. And I got this better job and better living arrangement. And I'm like, I don't even deserve this. Like, you know what my life looks like. You know that I'm with this guy and that these things are happening. And like my life falling apart made more sense than my life coming back together. And so when all those things, it was like, I can't betray you anymore. Like, I can't live outside of this space so distant from you anymore. And so I drove over. It was late. I just drove over to his house or the place he was staying. And I'm like, can't do this anymore. I'm done. We're through. And I'm going where God leads me. And this isn't, I don't know what to do about the fact that now I'm just the element of the church of I was supposed to marry him, but God showing me something else and I'm going to follow that. Mm-hmm. So I got out of that relationship.
Did he let you go easily, or was it difficult to get away from him?
I think that I remember asking him if he loved me. This is after months of being 6-7 months being, and he's like, you're just something to do. I'm okay. I didn't have any, he didn't give me any difficulty going. I mean, I just left and he didn't pursue. So just the rumors pursued, or right. Whatever those were.
Did you ever have anybody to confide in about these things that were happening with this guy? A bishop? Anybody? Friends?
I went to the bishop to try to confess.
Okay.
But it's a weird space because I remember going to him and being like, I need to talk about something. And he's like, Julie, you've already been here. Like, we've already talked about this. It was like he was trying to get me to cut myself a break, but I am pretty sure he confused me with someone else because I had never been to him before.
Oh my goodness. Well, bishops are very stressed because we put this massive load on their shoulders and
God worked that in my life to, the message that I got and what I took to prayer was I was being really hard on myself, more hard than I even realized at that point. Actually, I think this might be a good time the thing that I learned over time. My identity used to be in that space of I wouldn't know God if these things hadn't happened to me.
Right.
Like that somehow I needed it to happen, that I would be a completely different person if it hadn't, that my relationship with Christ maybe wouldn't even, it would be non-existent. But the thing is that that's not true because I was the little girl singing, I'm trying to be like Jesus before anything bad happened to me. Like I was the one reading Narnia just to read about Aslan and you see that symbolism of God interacting with I love those things. I learned that pain can be really sacred if we lean on God to get through it. The suffering is almost pointless without God. It's just suffering.
Yeah, well, and it will either make or break you. We have an opportunity when we go through suffering to either turn to the flesh or turn to God. And so when we learn to turn to God, that's when we experience healing and deliverance from that pain.
Yeah. And he taught me bad things are never orchestrated by him.
Right.
He would work his purposes in us anyway, embrace us in his love anyways, and whisper for us to come find him anyways. And I didn't need any of those things to happen to me for him to seek me.
Yeah. And that's really healing to know that, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I've gotten to experience it even more fully, but that's like another 10 years away from this point in the story.
Okay. All right. That's beautiful though. All right. So let's backtrack a little bit.
Okay.
So what happened next? So you got out of this relationship, you got a new job. What's next?
So I broke up with him and had actually some good dating experiences where I felt like God just was like, you're only going to get 1 or 2 dates, but I'm going to help you see that there are godly men that do see you, that get to experience just the difference in the interaction of someone that I'm not having to always like, it's not like
push away.
Yeah. Like just, I can't roll my tongue, but that was supposed to be that. Anyway, I'm trying to think how much longer before I met my husband. It wasn't that much longer.
Okay.
Probably within a year of that.
Okay. So how old were you when you met your husband?
20 or 21. I think I would think I was 20 when we met. I was just about to turn 21. I ended up at there's a guy named Ted and, but he convinced me to go bowling with him and a whole crowd. It was $1 bowling night. And I was like, okay, but only if I can bring my friend Emily. So it's not a date. So he took me and Emily to the bowling alley where I met Mike, my husband. The first thing he said to me was like, what's your name? He's like, you can just call me Sags. And I'm like, why would I would need a reason to call you that? I literally said that. You might have said Saggy, call me Saggy. I don't know, one of those. And he's like, oh, my last name. And at the time he pronounced it Sagnimeni because there's that silent G in there. Right. And he's like, my friends just call me Sags, Sagman, Saggy, these things. I'm like, okay, but what's your first name? So it's Mike. And I don't know, I was just still trying to like talk to him, and Emily's there. And I was like, hey, Emily, he kind of reminds me of this. Honestly, the last guy I had dated came to mind. I was like, he reminds me of this guy that it was in our singles ward, don't you think? And she's like, no. And this is important. It comes back. But bowling out, $1 bowling night was so busy, and we had like 25 people with us in our group, and we were just waiting and waiting. We're like, forget bowling. Let's go find a open restaurant and go eat. So it was 9 or 10 at night. And I don't think we realized how many things were closed. I mean, even in Mesa, it was just, everything was closed. And so we were caravanning around the valley, and we ended up at an IHOP because we thought that would be open. And it was December, and I don't like the cold, and it was cold it's Arizona. So it's not that cold for anyone normal. Ted got there first. And then I noticed Mike had driven up, and he was in the parking lot. And so Emily and Ted and I get out, and we're at to get in, and the door's locked. And we're like, Ted's like, okay, we'll just wait here until everyone gets here, and then we'll pick the next spot. And I'm like, okay, cool. But can you give me your keys so I can go sit in the car because I'm freezing? And Ted said no. What? I'm like, I'm not going to drive away with it. Like I have to stay here and freeze. And so I look over and I see Mike sitting in his car with it running. And so I just go and pop into the front seat and talk with him some more, and hope you don't mind. And then Emily came and sat in the back seat, and 15 minutes went, and everyone finally gathered, and Ted comes around knocking to gather me from Mike's car. Okay, we'll see you over there, and climb out and go with Ted. And we end up at Denny's, and this story is just one of my favorite stories. But so we end up at Denny's, and I'm trying to figure out how to sit next to Mike and get Emily, make it look like I might be sitting next to Ted, but get Emily between me and him at the last minute, while there's 20 other people trying to sit down at the table, and I've accomplished it. Emily says she had no idea, and Mike has said the same. I think Ted may have noticed of anyone, but I don't know. Just poor Ted. I know, poor Ted. But I don't know. I just kind of zeroed in on just. It was that challenge accepted. I'm going to get this guy talking. And so I was set on it. And so, we just end up sitting next to each other, talking about it, talking. Something really gross happened at the end of the table that was hilarious, that we kind of bonded over. Then I leave with Ted. We don't exchange numbers, nothing.
What?
We just, because I mean, and I was kind of kicking myself, but I also didn't want to lead with hey, can I have your number? Because I was really trying to get out of any of that space of being forward or being perceived as forward or anything. So he didn't get my number. I kind of wished I'd gotten his, but 2 weeks later he called me. Now, here's the other thing that I should point out is that the group of 20, there was no direct, the most direct connection I know is that Ted's brothers were there, and everyone else was a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend. There was 7 degrees of separation of everyone in this group. There were not very many immediate close connections that made up this group. So Mike didn't get my number because of that group. He got my number because the guy that I'd gone on a few dates with, and I'm like, hey, Emily, doesn't he remind you of this kid? And she's like, no, because he doesn't look like him at all. I like to say that it was when Nephi appeared like Laban to his Zoram, that it was just this filter so that I would think that, anyway, just so I'd say his name. He worked with the guy.
Oh.
And he got my number from him.
Wow.
And I just said his name randomly, and
he really wanted your number, didn't he?
Yeah. And so, it was just this thin thread and he called me 2 weeks later, and we started dating, started going on dates, and 14 months later we got married. it was just really refreshing to finally be with someone who wasn't like everyone else had been.
Yes.
You know, kept his hands to himself, was a gentleman.
Yes.
You know,
Let's talk about this for a second here. How were you responding to a guy that finally treats you right? Was it hard to process? Like, wait a minute. This guy, if he has all these green flags, is that a red flag?
Yeah.
Because you get to that point.
He must not love me.
Right.
I'm not interesting enough. I don't have anything of value to offer him because the only thing I have of value to offer men, he wasn't partaking of his own volition. Right. And so that was hard, especially with dating for so long. Right. It was great in the beginning to not have to like stave off, like just get off, stay away from me.
Don't touch me.
It has been amazing I was just telling him the other day that's something I cherish that he's been able to give me, is that safety.
Yes.
In that space.
Yeah.
So,
were you able to be open and honest with him when you were dating about all the things that had happened to you, or what did that kind of look like?
He didn't know about thing 2 until probably the last 5 years, actually.
Okay.
That was just something that I thought that would ruin everything for anyone to know that about me, and that he'd look at me differently. The only thing that really changed was that, I'm pretty sure my husband would go to jail if he ever came face to face with that guy. Then it's, and I'm like, okay, I was thinking that it would like reflect so badly on me that something would shift between us, and it was like, oh, you just want to protect me. Weird.
Was that really healing for you though? Did that heal some of your heart?
Yes, it absolutely did.
I love that.
So.
Okay. All right. So you meet your husband, you get married. What next?
Well, we didn't get married in the temple, and we got married on April Fool's Day. I got a lot of callbacks after I sent a save the date of, hang on, are we coming to Arizona for like the most epic April Fool's joke ever? And I was like, oh, that would have been awesome. But no, we're actually like, we're laid back, fun couple getting, it's a fun day, that's really all it was. So can you tell about my temple experience?
Yes, please.
Okay. So it was weird, first of all.
Okay. Why? Like what's your why?
Well, the first thing, I was probably in 7 layers.
Were you sealed the same day that you were endowed?
Yes.
Oh, so you did all of it?
Yeah.
All at the same time?
I did everything the same day.
So overwhelming.
And you get in there, and the first thing you hear is, are you willing to make promises? And if not, leave. And
you're like, what promises am I
making?
What
am I promising?
Wait a minute.
I'm like, everyone's staying, so they guess they can't be too bad, and okay, so I'm like, and I also didn't want to be the person who stood up and walked out, but I really felt like, I think if my curiosity was just a bit stronger than it was my temple sealing day. Like I wasn't going to bow out. I was like, right. The ball is rolling. Mm-hmm. We're doing this.
Right.
My mom was there to help me, and that was kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
Cause we live so far apart, and I'm glad she was there for that. But I also based whether or not I should feel okay with everything on the fact she was sitting there. And I felt it was really weird that I went to the temple to be closer to God, and only the only person who spoke to me was the dramatization of Satan. The only direct voice to me, if you fail to uphold your, or what, I have not gone to the temple often. I used to hate that fact as a faithful LDS person of like, my husband never takes me to the temple. We went like 3 times in 15 years. Mm-hmm. Maybe 3 times. I went by myself like a little bit more at one point in my life. And I felt like I had so much anxiety. Like I'd get in there and I was just buzzing and panicking. And like, I had this, like, you're never going to make it. You're never going to make it. You're never going to make it. Like just on repeat, because I'm trying to remember all of the words. Right. And I need to know my lines, I can't. And I'm a visual person, so I need to see them. And it's secret. It's sacred. So you can't write
It's
anything
secret. Let's be
down.
real.
Yeah.
It's totally secret.
So you can't write it down. I can't look at it to like remember what I'm supposed to
Right.
say and do. And so it's just this anxiety building of I'm not going to make it. If I die, like there's not going to be temple workers helping me know my lines that you know, and I'm not going to make it. And it was just so awful building up to the moment at the veil. And then it was just over. I'd get through. Aside from my sealing day when my family was there, and it was very joyous that my family they provided a joyous encounter as I passed through. Every other time it was just sterile. Well, and I never felt God there. I was just like, I should call first. I always show up when he's not here.
Schedule an appointment.
You're
Maybe.
right. I hate making appointments, so that's not going to happen. Yeah. So the other thing that happened with my sealing day was when I got my new name. Like there were weird things, but I love to see the temple. I'm going there someday, you know, like I cherish the temple. I was soaking it all in. I was taking everything so seriously. And I'm going to guard my new name with my life, you know, like I'm going to remember it. It's mine and it's sacred and this special thing. I get to the celestial room and my dad puts his arm around me and he tells me that my mom told him, he just starts telling me a story about like my name is like this special connection. Cause like his mother or his grandma, it was like his grandma's name or great grandma's name. And I'm like feeling like violated because this is my first time in the temple. This was my name, you know, like, how do you know it? And why is that not being like, why is this not being given the level of respect or,
like, why are you talking about it?
Yeah.
Like I was taught you don't talk about it with anybody.
Yeah. Right. I get, well, and I always heard with the caveat, unless you're in the temple and you can talk about everything in the temple, but I'm like,
including your new name?
Probably not that. I didn't know about it, but just you could talk about things in the temple because you're there.
Yeah. I was told when I was an ordinance worker that we really weren't supposed to talk about it at all.
I mean, it helps perpetuate like just no one's comparing notes.
Yeah.
Because I think if we were all comparing notes, we'd find out that we weren't the only ones thinking it was weird.
Yeah.
It was really funny. It's a tangent, but, so about 5 years ago, my youngest brother, he's 16 years younger than me. He graduated with like his bachelor's and then he was moving on to grad school. So he had his graduation and I flew into Idaho and all my family was there. And I am awake at this point. I'm awake watching all these this ritualistic ceremony with the alma mater. They were praising the alma mater with all the songs and everyone's in this weird garb and there's so many, just the pomp and ceremony of all of the authority figures and me and my kids, because I'm so like as soon as I was waking up, I was teaching my children what I was learning, and so they're like looking at me, and I'm looking at them, and we're just like, this is really weird, and why are they praising an alma mater? Like praise goes to God only, and we were all just like so weirded out. And afterwards, my family and are hanging around, and my oldest brother was like, yeah, it kind of reminded me of like it was so culty and it reminded me of the first time I went to the temple.
What?
Without any recognition of what he had just said and those connections that he'd drawn, you know.
He says it, but he makes no connections.
Yeah.
Okay. So you went through the temple, had some experiences. What part did the church play when you were newlywed and starting to have your kids? And were you guys taking callings? Tell us about all those things.
So, very active in the church, as much as could be. I have chronic migraines and they started about that time. That might be significant, but, I was just listening to another episode where it was just talking about breaking oaths and covenants and healing coming from those things. So
yes,
I got pregnant right away and my oldest was premature, and born during RSV season. And I got a calling extended to me to be in the nursery with my brand new premature baby during RSV season.
And nobody thought like this is not a good place for her right now?
No, of course not.
Of course not. We can't think about people's problems. That would give us a problem.
And I still lived in the space of God. This is the calling from God. And so I prayed a lot to him. And I brought up my concerns about my baby's health. And in my like setting apart was there was a, when a prayer stops being like, when you can feel that God did speak through someone when they weren't meaning to, maybe, when it goes from someone speaking to God just spoke to me. That happened in my setting apart, with a promise of her health and safety. And so I went, I fully committed. I just trusted that. And she was completely fine for that. Mostly she just slept in her car seat anyway, but we were active in callings. They stress me out, a lot. My husband does a lot better, like showing up and doing the things. And I tend to want to run away when things get stressful. And it helped, like all of our callings, it seemed like we're in the primary a lot and we'd be co-teachers. And I'm like, I will be there and support you, but like, I don't like leaving church on the edge of tears, of like overwhelm and stress. So if you want to handle this, I will show up with you. And even then, sometimes I didn't show up with him. They just, I don't know, callings are really overwhelming to me. But I tried really hard. I feel like I just always felt like I was failing, and it was hard to face that. It was hard to face always feeling like I was failing. And I got to the point where I realized like callings aren't volunteer. Like they might be free, like they're unpaid, but they're not volunteer. Because if they were volunteer, I'd get the one that I'm asking for.
Right. They're like thrust upon you.
Yeah.
Or at the least there would be respect when we can't take a calling, at the very least.
Right.
Right.
I moved into a new ward, and this isn't like early. This is just on the topic of callings. We moved into a new ward. It was the last ward before I woke up, and I was like, I need friends. So if you put me in a calling, I need to not be separated from adults. I need. There's just these things I need.
Did they call you to primary after this?
The library.
Oh my goodness.
I'm like, you want to shove me in a closet?
Like, that was helpful. Thank you.
And then the secondary one was, they're like, well, you homeschool, so you like kids. So do you want to be in primary then? Or like, we felt inspired to put you in primary. And I'm like, I don't feel inspired to take that. I homeschool. So these are 2 hours.
Right.
The only 2 hours I am not with children. I'd like them both, please. Oh, actually, like sacrament meeting, you're with your family, and it's different, but like I'm not feeling inspired by that. So, and so when they started asking me, like, I'm like, I won't turn down every calling. I just need it to like, here's some ideas, ones that I'll do. The Relief Society teacher literally turns green from her stage fright. Like she doesn't want to be up there. I want that one. Why don't you let's do that switcheroo, and that never would happen. And so I just started asking to be the ward paradigm shifter. And then I never got any callings extended to me after that.
The word paradigm shifter, that is glorious. I would have loved to be that.
Right?
You kind of have to insert yourself into that call.
Right?
The word paradigm shifter.
Like God called me to it. So unofficially on paper.
Shift your paradigm here.
I tried to be that in all the classes with my comments. And then I'd get someone who'd be like, I'd start speaking. I'd just start speaking. Wouldn't get too far into it. And the instructor would yell sources at me. Source.
I'm like, what is this, a court of law? We're in church.
It's not in the manual. It's not. I'm like, but I had an experience with God and the Holy Spirit teaching me something. And I think that's a reliable source. And he didn't. What's really funny, what's really funny is now because now we're on the other side of things and people want to we want to go straight to God and they want to appeal to authority. So now me and my husband will be like sources, like when we're talking about.
That's genius. I'm going to start doing that.
Yeah.
Sources. They're like the handbook. Like, no, that's not a source.
It's not the source. Go to the mountaintop.
The sentence safe and effective is not a source. Sorry.
No. I'm like, yeah, that was a recommendation from the CDC, which they may think they're God, but it is literally not God.
All right. Active in the church, homeschooling your children, takes lots of callings.
Mm-hmm.
What was the first step to your wake up journey? What happened?
Well, I was also a very weird Mormon. I never fit in.
Mm-hmm.
And
I love being that. I've always been that.
Yeah. I was like, you guys say you're a peculiar people, but you are so mainstream, like my children learned about Santa Claus at church. They learned about the Easter Bunny at church.
Because you have to have the word Easter egg hunt, don't you know? Like that's part of our religion.
I was like, I was fine, like focusing on the nativity and on the resurrection
and Jesus.
Exactly. Where it's like, why split time? Why do the custody battle? Like let's just give Jesus full custody of our holidays if we're going to do them.
Yeah.
And
focus it on God and Jesus and the Spirit.
Because even I spent a lot of years just trying to reconcile Christmas and all the traditions because even I wanted to just get through the spiritual things to open gifts, right. to or watch my kid. Like I just wanted to get through it so I can get to what the holiday was really about for all of us. And it was those things. And I've moved away from pretty much all holidays and stuff. And it's just a personal decision. I don't think everyone has to do how I view things.
Absolutely.
So just want to put that there because I'm okay if people eat things I don't eat, celebrate things I don't celebrate.
I think that there are many ways to be good and then there's many ways to be evil. And so what we have to discern is what is good and what is evil and stop placing like judgments on things that like people have to decide if this is good for you, that's good.
Right.
Okay.
And I'm totally okay if people do
like,
things differently.
We're going to have differences and that's okay. What matters is our heart. So yeah. And
I think it comes to when I'm like, I'm following God when I do these things. I don't want anyone to feel like they're not following God if they are doing it differently.
Yeah.
So I had hard pregnancies. I was learning to get really good at asking for help. Oh, cause I was the weird Mormon. Yeah. Cause, I homeschooled. I was in an MLM. I plant-based, sugar-free. So I used to call the people with candy in their pockets at church dealers, and be like, if you want to give that to my child, be prepared to take them home for the next 4 hours because we're a sugar-free household, and that will wreck them, and it will wreck the rest of our Sabbath or our Sunday.
People think you're so weird and you're one of those moms. You're like, yes, I am.
Yeah, I'm like, but honestly, like even my children can know the fruit of those decisions. Like I'm actually here just on the tail end of a little camp out that our family had down in Flagstaff, and I drove here from there. And my 12-year-old son, I put a lot of work into making sure we weren't just relying on hot dogs and s'mores. I had a lot of things put together for us to be able to be nourished while we were on vacation. And he's like, Mom, thank you so much for not having all the sugar. Like, I feel so good. I know how I felt before,
Right.
And so I'm sorry, a 12-year-old boy is grateful to not have sugar. Yeah. And we're not completely sugar-free, but at this point of young, like early on, I was very strictly, a lot more rigid with what I ate. But I've always been trying to find healing with all these things.
I think if we, as people, could understand why people do what they do, we wouldn't think it was so weird. I've been sugar-free for 10 years. And I would be sick all the time if I wasn't, And so I'd rather have my life and do without the sugar. But people... there's just this rarity of even asking why. Right. So ask why, and then you'll know.
So the other things, I started Kundalini yoga. I was in this, it was interesting.
What is Kundalini
Yeah,
yoga? Sorry, I don't know what that
it's
is.
It's okay. It's said it's like the most ancient form, like the most royal form. So my sister introduced me to, she almost like, she tried to get me to do everything she was doing. So this thing she was kind of holding close. I'm like, what are you doing though? And I had to like, coax it out of her. Cause she's like, no, this is just a little bit weird. But, there was a Christ-centered Kundalini yoga teacher that she had, and she introduced me into this practice. And it's the teacher I had wrote a book that expands on Kundalini, was like the most ancient yoga, even so much that like the part of Christ's life that isn't documented, that he was learning those practices himself, like this body, just this connection to heaven practice. So it was meditation that I was drawn to, because I was really depressed. I was trying to do everything right with the church. I was trying to be active in my callings and failing. I was trying to be a visiting teacher and failing. I was trying to go to church every Sunday and failing through the lens I had. That's just how I was perceiving everything I was dealing with. I didn't have a lot of support from church. I had bed rest pregnancies. I remember I asked for help because I couldn't get out of bed to even pour cereal for my like 4 and 5 year old. My husband would help when he works a lot. And so he'd come home and he just filled in all the gaps for me during this time. But I had there was another family in the ward who had a teenage daughter who had appendicitis, had her appendix removed. And I know for a fact that this teenage daughter didn't help around the house. Her mom did everything. The teenage daughter didn't help around the house. Her mom, her plate was actually, and it's fine. She had a lot of like extracurricular things. They had this thing set up. Her mom's plate was actually lighter because she was just convalescing. The teenager, they got 10 days of meals, and I was one of the people they asked to see if, like, while I was on bed rest pregnancy, if I'd provide one of them, while I was actively asking for help.
Why?
So I always felt like I just wasn't seen, acknowledged, liked enough for someone to help me. Because this other gal, she was actually one of my only friends in the ward. I was there 8 years, and I had maybe 3 friends by the end of those 8 years. And she was one of them, and I love her to death and stuff. But that scenario of how the ward handled it was just awful. Anyway, so I started this practice of yoga and meditation. I did 1,000-day meditation, and I felt like I was on this journey of self-love. And yeah, I was on a journey of self-love. And I think I was going to say that maybe I came to know a new agey Jesus, like the new age Jesus, like a version of him. But I had sacred moments in my meditation. Like there was this time where I felt that, or I had this vision open up to me. And I was on my knees with a brush scrubbing my brain. And Jesus entered, and he took that from me, and he's like, you be still, essentially, like, you are good, I'll take over. And this work of like meditation was supposed to be like clearing my subconscious, clearing my faulty scripts, healing me. And Jesus took over. And at the time, I saw it as confirmation that this was healing me, that the meditation was healing, that this was like confirmation. Now I see it as God's like, you scrubbing is you doing these things. I will heal you. Like, I will take care of this, and you don't need this brush. You can put the brush down, and you just be still. You just come unto me. I just didn't have that experience. Like, I didn't have that framework yet. I spent 3 years doing meditation and yoga, got into astrology, a lot of new agey things. I had some experiences with like a heavenly mother. Still need to process now with what I know now. I had pancreatitis and gallbladder stuff, and I was there's so much to this story. I was learning therapeutic guided imagery and meditation, and my sister was part of this thing when I had my first gallbladder flare up. We had no idea what was happening, and so she led a meditation. Now I would just be like, let's pray. Right. But we're doing this meditation, which is chanting in some Sanskrit language. And she said that my deceased grandpa came and gave me a blessing, and that she heard him say to use these tools I'm learning to heal myself. And so I spent like a year in and out of the hospital because I wasn't going to let them take my gallbladder, because I was going to use visualization and these like energy modalities to heal, and believing that I was healing. And I did have some sacred moments where I went to God with the pain, and the Jesus I went to is the Jesus I've always been to, and I was including him in it. God showed me that the just add Jesus is the broad path. And so I see all these Christ-centered things, and I'm like, if you have to add Jesus to it, it's not, he is the way. Like, if it's not just Jesus, then it's the just add Jesus. And that's okay to like, I'm not going to condemn anything, just the lessons I was learning, and I needed to step away from all of them. When I feel like I am pretty gifted with like astrology when I was learning it, and like I had all this intuition and things that fit. And then God's like, yeah, but you're asking the stars and not me. And so I'm like, okay. So I'm going to, I don't want that. I don't want that taking up space in my life anymore. So there's a lot of things. I moved into the new agey world with my like complete like love for Jesus, thinking he was healing me, but I never actually healed. I just kind of got through things. There was no actual healing. There was not like, I don't have my gallbladder, if I had healed, I'd have that,
Right.
So.
Okay. So you entered to the new age world, went through that, kind of experienced things there. And that was kind of an awakening. What happened next?
In that space, I did some weird things. I had this struggle with food all my life, which we already heard. I already laid the groundwork for that. And so I was like, I just was praying, like and with the gallbladder thing, I got a lot of food fear, because if you eat fat, that's what like triggers the bile, and then I'm in the hospital anyway. So there was a lot of fear, of pain, and just how do I eat, and do I have to eat? I'm like, I hate that I have to eat. And then like this, like, it's like, do you though? And I was like, do I though? Where did that come from? So I started praying about, food or eating, and breatharianism came my way. And I was like, that's kind of weird, like the way this like Australian person does this, but I'm going to just pray on this thing, because she's like, there's all these steps to get into it. I'm like, but God, can I do this? And I got like, yes. I'm like, do I have to do all these steps? He's like, no, what do I have to do? Just ask me. I was like, ask for what? And he's like, to be nourished. Like I called it living on light. And
so is this like not eating and living on breathing and breathing?
Yes. Okay. But I like the breatharianism is like breath sustains you, and breath is like in the new agey, breath is the sustaining of all life.
So are you like breathing different, or like?
Well, I kind of eschewed kind of all of the new agey part of it, and just was like, God, teach me what you would want me to know, because I learned it was possible, but they're not talking about you.
Right.
So what would you have me know? And so that was like letting the light of Christ sustain me, and asking for that. And when I'd get a yes, I could move into that space. And I still like pray about this. Like, I don't know if this was.
So did you go without eating for a certain period of time?
No water, no food I was just praying to be sustained, to be nourished. And it wasn't fasting because I was being filled. I was receiving.
Okay.
But I wasn't eating or drinking
So
anything.
how long did you do that for?
I had two different, I didn't go very long, but the first time was about 6 days, and we ended up going hiking in the mountains in Arizona in the summer. And I was thriving, and I was like all the signs of hydration were there, like, and there were zero signs of dehydration.
Interesting.
But then I got out of alignment with God. I think pride was kind of like, cause pride, it will get you every single time.
This is so true.
And if I was doing it, like when my motives changed, when it wasn't a connection with God, it was just starving, or like I had to, after that 6 days, I was like, okay, I was told to stop. And so I did. And then, later there was another period of time where, it was about 2 weeks. I think half of it was sanctioned and the other half I was trying to force. But with these like living on light experiences, I was in this space, and I remember being told to take off my garments. And I was like, are we okay? Like, are we good? Like, are you sure? Because like, what did I do? Like, did I do something wrong? And so, I prayed about it and prayed about it and prayed about it. And was like, take off your garments, and double, triple, quadruple checked. And so I stopped wearing them. And every day I'd wake up and be like, we're okay though, right? Like praying, like, we're okay. You don't want me to wear these, but these were like my covenant. Like these represent this covenant with you. Like, are we okay? And always was getting, yep, you're good. I feel like I was brought through a point in my life right then that God was teaching me to say no to everything. It didn't cross my mind to say no to even a belief with him, because he was walking me through the process. Like I was working with him, so I couldn't be like but everything was on the table. I remember it was just I want you to learn to say no, so that when you say yes, it means something. And I was like, I've always kind of thought it meant something. And now I can see even clearly now how much I was just doing what I'd been taught to do and just following the script and following the program. But it was about 5 years before I actually woke up. I was given, I was just given these pieces: take off your garments, learn to say no. I remember being like, could I leave the church? And I got clear. It was just so clear. Do you want to? And I was like, actually, it was yes. Do you want to? And I was like, no. I thought about it for a second. I'm like, no, because the temple and my eternal family and I mean, that's pretty much the list.
Right. Is this all before 2020?
Yes, this is like 2015, 16, 17 in there.
Okay, cool.
And then I start battling this. Like I was in the energy work world. I sensed that like felt like I was just under attack. And so I was like trying to like ask like, what is this that's attacking me? And I just saw this octopusy, black, inky, tentacly thing that was just like completely overwhelming me. And so in that space, I was like, oh, I'll draw my sword, my spiritual sword and my armor of God type of thing. But it was still in this new agey space. It was still in this like visualization space. Mm-hmm. And the tentacly thing broke my sword.
Oh.
And so I was just like completely powerless to this thing. It's so interesting looking back at these memories and thinking about now, how different I'd approach it now, how not reliant upon myself I would be, how much I'd be going to God. Mm-hmm. And just what now, like deliver me, like I can't do any, like help, and back then it was like learning how to love myself, learning how to heal myself, and it was very self-directed, just very, very focused on the self. And, what the interesting thing that happened though is that while I was processing all those things and trying to fight this thing, I was praying. I just remember I was in the shower and I'd been praying about just deliverance from this thing, but I was trying to use all my tools. And Brigham Young showed up, I guess not like a vision, but I don't know how else to explain it. All these things I was envisioning all these things, and I could see the thing that was attacking me, and Brigham Young was there, and then he stabbed it, and it was on me, and I have a picture of it, and I was looking back at that a couple years ago when I was waking up, and it was just this drawing of Brigham Young stabbing me in the heart.
Thanks, guys, for joining us for part 1 of this episode of the Clarity Podcast. If you guys enjoyed part 1, you're not going to want to miss part 2 that's coming up super soon. Tune in for the second half of Julie's story here on the Clarity Podcast.